I never believed in the supernatural until I started working the night shift at WCRP 88.7 FM. Looking back, I should have known something was wrong when a radio station was paying $25 an hour for what amounted to pressing buttons and spinning records. But I was 23, broke and desperate after dropping out of college. The Craigslist ad seemed too good to be true, which, as it turns out, it was. The Night Voice operated out of a cramped building on the outskirts of Pine Valley, Oregon. The structure looked like it had been thrown together in the 70s and forgotten about ever since. Peeling paint, a roof that probably leaked, and windows that were either too dirty to see through or intentionally obscured. I couldn't tell which. Helen Kovac, the station manager, met me at the front door. She was maybe 65, with steel grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed older than the rest of her. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm, but her fingers were ice cold, even though it was July. "Danny can't write?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes, Mum. Hear about the DJ position." She looked me up and down, then nodded slowly. "Come inside. We need to talk." The interior was what you'd expect from a small-town radio station. Wood paneling from another decade, motivational posters that weren't motivational anymore, and the persistent smell of old coffee and cigarette smoke. Helen led me through the main area, past cubicles for the day staff, to the broadcast booth in the back. "This is where you'll be working," she said, opening the door to reveal a small room lined with sound-dampening foam. The equipment looked newer than the rest of the building, but not by much. Midnight to 6 in the morning, 7 days a week. You'll mostly be playing music requests, giving weather updates, maybe some local news if anything happens. What about holidays? No holidays at night. The show goes on. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her jacket pocket. There are some specific guidelines you'll need to follow. Non-negotiable. The paper was actually a laminated card, worn around the edges, like it had been handled frequently. At the top, in bold letters, night shift rules, memorize and follow without exception. Never acknowledge listeners who call asking about the frequency. If you hear children singing between 2 and 4, play classical music immediately. Emergency broadcast signals that aren't from the county are not emergencies. The basement door stays locked. You don't have a key for a reason. If the static forms words, don't listen to what it says. Caller ID showing all zeros means hang up without speaking. Never play the same song twice between midnight and dawn. The coffee pot turns itself on. Let it. If you see someone outside the booth windows, they're not there. The 3:33 caller gets exactly 30 seconds of airtime. No more, no less. Emergency exits are for emergencies only. Something might follow you out. If the lights go out, keep broadcasting in the dark. I read through the list twice, waiting for Helen to tell me it was some kind of joke or hazing ritual for new employees. She didn't. "These are serious," she said. "People have been hurt when they don't follow the rules. I need to know you'll stick to them no matter what happens." "What do you mean, no matter what happens? It's a radio station, not a nuclear facility." Helen's expression didn't change. "Do you want the job or not?" I needed the money. Student loans weren't going to pay themselves, and my parents had made it clear that dropping out meant being cut off financially. I want it. Good. Trevor handles the evening shift until midnight. He'll show you the equipment tonight. After that, you're on your own. She handed me a set of keys. Front door, booth door, and supply closet. That's all you get access to. I noticed there were several other doors in the building, including what looked like a basement entrance near the back. What about? That's all you get access to, she repeated firmly. Your shift starts at midnight tonight. Don't be late. Trevor was waiting for me when I arrived at 11:45 that first night. He was maybe 30, thin, with the kind of nervous energy that made him constantly fidget with his hands. The moment I walked into the booth, he started gathering his things. You're Danny, right? Helen said. You'd be taking over. He was already putting on his jacket. Look, the equipment is pretty straightforward. This is the main board, music libraries on the computer. Phone lines are here. Weather comes in on the ticker every hour. He was talking fast, like he couldn't wait to leave. I tried to ask questions about the setup, but he kept glancing at the clock. What about those rules Helen gave me? Are they? Follow them, Trevor said sharply, then seemed to catch himself. I mean, Helen's particular about how things are done at night. Different vibe than the day shift, you know? Just follow the rules and you'll be fine. At 11:58, he was already at the door. Good luck, Danny. Really, I hope it works out for you. The way he said it made me think he didn't expect it to. For the first few hours, everything was normal. I played music requests from insomniacs and night shift workers, gave weather updates, and read a few local news items Helen had left for me. The phone rang occasionally. Truckers wanting to hear specific songs, a few people just looking for someone to talk to in the lonely hours before dawn. Around 1:45, I heard a clicking sound from the break room. When I went to investigate, I found the coffee pot had turned itself on and was brewing a fresh pot. I checked the timer. It wasn't set. I looked for a motion sensor or some kind of automatic feature, but there was nothing. Rule number 8. The coffee pot turns itself on. Let it. I left it alone and went back to the booth. The coffee actually smelled pretty good. The rest of the night passed without incident. At 6 o'clock sharp, Helen arrived to open the station for the day shift. She looked at me expectantly. How was it? Quiet. The coffee pot turned on by itself around 1:45, but the rules said to let it. She nodded approvingly. Good. Same time tomorrow night. The second and third nights were similar. I was starting to think the rules were just Helen's quirky way of managing the station. Maybe the coffee pot had a faulty timer. Maybe she'd had problems with DJs not following format in the past. The strangest thing that happened was hearing what sounded like footsteps upstairs. But when I checked during my break, there was no upstairs, just a peaked roof with no access. On the fourth night, I almost messed up rule number 7. I was playing requests and accidentally queued up Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, the same song I had played an hour earlier. I caught it just as I was about to hit play and switch to something else. It was an honest mistake, but I found myself oddly relieved that I'd caught it. That same night, I started noticing sounds in the building that I couldn't explain. Scratching in the walls, like mice but too rhythmic. a door creaking somewhere even though all the doors I had access to were closed. And once, around 3 o'clock, what sounded like someone walking around in the main office area, even though I was the only one in the building. During my break, I found myself standing in front of the basement door Helen had mentioned. It was solid wood, painted institutional green, with a heavy-duty lock. I tried the handle out of curiosity, locked tight. There was a small gap at the bottom, and when I knelt down to look, I could see that it led to a staircase going down into darkness. A musty smell drifted up, like old water and something else I couldn't identify. Rule number 4. The basement door stays locked. You don't have a key for a reason. I went back to the booth and tried to focus on work, but I kept thinking about that rule. Why would a radio station even need a basement? And why was Helen so specific about not having access to it? The first time I violated one of the rules, it was completely by accident. It was my 7th night on the job. Around 2:30, the phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID display, all zeros. Just a line of zeros where the number should be. Rule number 6 floated through my mind, but I hesitated. Maybe it was a technical glitch. Maybe someone was calling from a blocked number and the system was displaying it wrong. I was curious, and curiosity has always been my weakness. I picked up the phone. WCRP, night voice. You're on with Danny. Silence. Dead air for 30 seconds. That felt like 30 minutes. I was about to hang up when a voice came through the line. If you could call it a voice. It sounded like metal grinding against metal, like words being scraped out of rust and broken glass. You weren't supposed to answer. The line went dead. Every light in the station flickered once, then went back to normal. I sat there staring at the phone, my hands shaking slightly. The voice hadn't sounded human. It hadn't sounded like anything that should be able to speak at all. I didn't answer any calls with all zero caller ID after that. 3 nights later, I encountered rule number 2. I was playing a set of classic rock when, during a quiet moment between songs, I heard something coming through the speakers that definitely wasn't on any record. Children's voices, singing in harmony, Ring Around the Rosie, Pocket Full of Posies, Ashes, Ashes, We All Fall Down. The voices were clear and sweet, but they were coming through the broadcast equipment, even though no input was selected. I checked the board. Nothing was feeding into the system that should produce sound. The children kept singing, the same verse over and over. Ring Around the Rosie, Pocket Full of Posies. Rule number 2. If you hear children singing between 2 and 4, play classical music immediately. I frantically searched through the music library for classical pieces, my hands shaking as I typed. The children's voices were getting louder, and there was something wrong with the harmony now. Too many voices. Voices that didn't quite match up with human pitch ranges. I found Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major and hit play. The moment the piano music started, the singing stopped. Complete silence except for Chopin's melancholy melody filling the broadcast booth. I let the entire piece play, not daring to switch to anything else until it was over. When it ended, I put on another classical piece, then another. I played classical music for the rest of the night, until the sun came up and Helen arrived. Classical music all night? She asked, looking at the playlist log. I heard children singing. Around 2:17, The rule said to play classical immediately. She nodded, but I caught something in her expression. Relief, maybe, or approval. Good, you're learning. But I wasn't learning fast enough. The calls about the frequency started the next week. At first, it was just 1 or 2 a night. People calling in and asking if I could tune them in to the frequency, or if I knew when the frequency would be broadcasting tonight. I followed rule number 1 and hung up without acknowledging the question, but the calls kept coming. Do you know about the frequency? Can you help me find the frequency? Why won't you tell me about the frequency? The callers started getting agitated when I wouldn't respond. One man called back 5 times in an hour, each time more insistent that I help him. Another woman started crying on the phone, begging me to just tell her the number. Before I hung up, I had no idea what they were talking about, but something about their desperation made me glad I was following the rule. Rule number 9 was tested on my 15th night. I was reading weather updates when I saw movement outside the booth window. Someone was standing just at the edge of the light spill from the building, perfectly still. It looked like a man in a dark coat, but the details were hard to make out. He was facing the station, and even though I couldn't see his features clearly, I had the distinct impression he was looking directly at me. I blinked, and he was gone. I immediately checked the security monitor that showed the parking area and the approach to the building. Nothing. No person, no car, no movement at all. But I knew I'd seen someone. Rule number 9. If you see someone outside the booth windows, they're not there. The rule didn't say the figures weren't real. It said they weren't there. I was starting to understand that there might be an important difference, but it was the 333 caller that really shook me. Every night, at exactly 3:33, the phone would ring. Not 3:32, not 3:34. Exactly 3:33. The caller ID always showed a local number, and it was always the same woman's voice. Elderly, with a slight tremor that suggested advanced age. "Hello, dear," she would say when I answered. "Could I speak on the air for a moment? About my grandson." Rule number 10. The 333 caller gets exactly 30 seconds of airtime. No more, no less. "Of course, Mom. You're on the air. Thank you. I'm looking for my grandson, Tommy Delmont. He went missing in 1987. He was just 17. Brown hair, green eyes, about 5'8". If anyone has any information, please call the station." There would be a pause, then she'd add, "He's a good boy. He just got confused sometimes. The doctors said it wasn't his fault." I'd give her exactly 30 seconds, then gently cut her off. "Thank you for calling, Mom. We'll keep an eye out." "Thank you, dear. God bless." This happened every single night. The same woman, the same missing grandson, the same description. After the first week, I tried to research Tommy Delmont online during my breaks. I found a few old newspaper articles from 1987 about a missing teenager, but the trail went cold quickly. What bothered me most was that if Tommy had gone missing in 1987, this woman had been calling about him for over 30 years. On my 20th night, after she'd given her usual plea for information, she added something new. "He's in the basement, you know. He's been there all along." Then the line went dead. right at the 30-second mark. I stared at the phone, thinking about the locked basement door and the musty smell that came up from the gap at the bottom. I thought about the scratching sounds in the walls and the footsteps in empty rooms. For the first time since I'd started working at WCRP, I was genuinely scared. The third week was when things started getting really strange. On Monday night, around 1:15, the emergency broadcast system activated. The familiar alert tone sounded through the speakers, followed by an official-sounding voice. This is an emergency alert for Pine Valley County. We have reports of a biological containment breach at the Pine Valley Research Facility. All residents are advised to remain indoors and seal all windows and doors. Do not go outside under any circumstances. Further updates will follow. I'd never heard of a Pine Valley Research Facility, but the alert sounded legitimate. I was about to relay the message on air when I remembered rule number 3. Emergency broadcast signals that aren't from the county are not emergencies. I checked the equipment. The alert wasn't coming through the county's emergency system. It was being broadcast on a different frequency and somehow bleeding into our signal. I didn't relay it. The next morning, I asked Helen about it. Did anything happen in Pine Valley last night? Any kind of emergency or containment breach? She looked at me sharply. Why do you ask? I got a fake emergency broadcast. The rule said not to relay anything that wasn't from the county system. Good. No, nothing happened in Pine Valley last night. Nothing ever happens in Pine Valley. She paused. What exactly did the alert say? I told her about the biological containment breach and the research facility. Her expression grew more serious. Did you relay any of it? No, I followed the rule. Good, she said again, but she looked troubled. If it happens again, you still don't relay it, no matter how official it sounds. Tuesday night brought rule number 5 into play. I was playing a request block when static started building in the background of the music. At first, I thought it was interference from another station, but as I adjusted the equipment, the static began to form patterns. Then words. Let us out. The voice in the static was different from the children's singing or the all zeros caller. This was multiple voices speaking in unison, layered over each other like an audio palimpsest. Male and female, young and old, all saying the same thing. Let us out. Let us out. Let us out. Rule number 5. If the static forms words, don't listen to what it says. I quickly adjusted the signal processors and audio filters, trying to clean up the transmission. The voices in the static grew louder, more insistent. I could make out individual words now. Please, trapped. So long. Let us out. Help us. My hands were shaking as I worked the controls. Part of me wanted to listen, to try to understand what the voices were saying, but the rule was clear. Don't listen. I managed to filter out most of the static, and the voices faded back to a whisper, then disappeared entirely. But for the rest of the night, I could swear I heard faint murmuring in the background of every song I played. Wednesday night, I learned why rule number 8 existed. The coffee pot had been turning itself on every night around the same time, and I'd grown accustomed to the sound. But this night, it was bothering me. The brewing process was loud, and it was interfering with my ability to monitor the broadcast. I decided to unplug it. The moment I pulled the plug from the wall, every piece of equipment in the station started malfunctioning. The main board reset itself, the computer crashed, and the transmitter began cycling through different frequencies randomly. The lights flickered, and I could hear electronic whining and clicking from every direction. I quickly plugged the coffee pot back in. Everything returned to normal immediately. Board functioning, computer rebooting cleanly, transmitter locked back onto 88.7. Rule number 8. The coffee pot turns itself on. Let it. I never touched that coffee pot again. Thursday night was the basement sounds. I first heard them around 1:30. Heavy banging from beneath the floor, like someone pounding on pipes or wooden beams, then scratching like fingernails on wood. The sounds seemed to be coming from directly below the broadcast booth. As the night went on, I realized the sounds were following a rhythm. At first, I thought it was random, but there was definitely a pattern. It took me almost an hour to figure out what it was. The sounds were matching my heartbeat. When I was calm, the sounds were soft and slow. When I got nervous or excited, they became faster and louder. When my heart raced from fear, which happened more and more often, the basement sounds became almost violent, like something was throwing itself against the walls down there. I spent the rest of the night trying to control my breathing and keep my heart rate steady. It helped, but it also meant acknowledging that something down there was somehow connected to me, responding to my physical state. That thought didn't help my heart rate at all. Friday night nearly broke me. I was playing requests as usual when I made a mistake. I queued up Hotel California by the Eagles, a song I'd played about 2 hours earlier. I didn't realize my error until the second verse started, and by then, it was too late to switch without dead air. Rule number 7. Never play the same song twice between midnight and dawn. Nothing happened at first. The song played normally through the first chorus, the second verse, and into the second chorus. Then, right at the line, you can check out any time you like. Every light in the station went out. Complete darkness. The only illumination came from the LED displays on the broadcasting equipment, casting everything in an eerie green glow. But the music kept playing, and I could hear that we were still broadcasting. The on-air light was still glowing red. Rule number 12. If the lights go out, keep broadcasting in the dark. I couldn't see the board clearly, couldn't read the song cue or caller ID display. I had to operate entirely by feel and memory, adjusting levels and preparing the next song by the faint glow of indicator lights. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely work the controls. The song finished, all 7 minutes of it, and I managed to start the next track without dead air. The moment the new song began, the lights came back on. I sat there, blinking in the sudden brightness, sweating and breathing hard. When Helen arrived that morning, she took one look at me and asked, "What happened?" I played the same song twice. The lights went out. She nodded grimly. "But you kept broadcasting." "Yes." "Good. That's the most important thing. No matter what happens, you keep broadcasting." "Helen, what is this place? What are those rules really protecting me from?" She studied my face for a long moment. "You're not ready for that conversation yet, but you're learning. Keep following the rules, Danny. They're there for a reason. I drove home that morning with my hands still shaking, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. But the money was good, and I was starting to understand the rules. I could handle this. I was wrong. Helen was waiting for me when I arrived for my shift on Monday night of my 4th week. She'd been out of town for what she called a family emergency, and Trevor had been covering some of my shifts. I was actually glad to see her. Things had been getting stranger, and I had questions that needed answers. "How are you holding up, Danny?" she asked as we sat in the main office area. "I've been following the rules, all of them, but I need to know what's really going on here." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I think you're ready. You've proven you can handle the responsibility. Have a seat." She poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot that had turned itself on earlier, then sat across from me at the small conference table. "WCRP wasn't built on empty land," she began. "This site used to be the Pine Valley Psychiatric Hospital, built in 1923, operated until 1963. They treated everything here: depression, shell shock from the war, schizophrenia, developmental disabilities. Back then, they didn't really understand mental illness, so they just warehoused people." I sipped my coffee and waited for her to continue. The hospital had 3 levels above ground and 2 below. The basement levels were for the most severe cases, violent patients, people who couldn't be controlled with the limited treatments available at the time. Essentially, it was a dungeon. Patients down there rarely saw sunlight, rarely had visitors. Many were forgotten by their families. What happened to it? Fire, December 15th, 1963. Started in the electrical system and spread fast. The building was old, not up to code, and the staff was understaffed that night. Most of the patients on the upper floors were evacuated, but the basement levels— She shook her head. The doors were locked from the outside. Security protocol. In the chaos of the fire, they couldn't get them open in time. I felt a chill run down my spine. How many people died? Officially, 43 patients and 3 staff members. Unofficially, more. Some patients didn't have proper records. Some had been forgotten by everyone who might have reported them missing. She leaned forward. They sealed off the basement levels instead of excavating them. Too dangerous, too expensive. The whole site was abandoned for 30 years before the radio station was built. Built on top of the old basement levels. Exactly. The foundation work disturbed things that had been sealed away. The first station manager started noticing problems immediately. Equipment malfunctions, strange sounds, unexplained phenomena. Then the staff started reporting encounters. What kind of encounters? Helen got up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a thick folder and set it on the table between us. "Read for yourself." The folder contained incident reports dating back to 1994, when WCRP first went on the air. Staff reports of hearing voices through equipment that wasn't connected to any input. Sightings of people who weren't there. Equipment that operated itself. Phone calls from numbers that didn't exist. One report from 1996 detailed how a night DJ named Paul Henderson had disappeared mid-broadcast. His voice was on the air one moment, then silence. When the day shift arrived, they found the booth empty. Henderson's car still in the parking lot, his jacket still on the back of his chair. He was found 3 days later, wandering Highway 101, 200 miles away, with no memory of the previous week. Another report from 1999 described how a DJ named Lisa Parker had been found in the booth speaking in languages she didn't know: Latin, Greek, what sounded like medieval English. She had no memory of it afterward, but recordings showed she'd been speaking in different voices for over an hour, conducting what sounded like conversations with people who weren't there. The rules, Helen said, watching me read, were developed over 27 years of incidents. Each one exists because someone violated it and something bad happened. The frequency, I said, remembering all those desperate callers. What is that? In 1994, a DJ named Robert Walsh tried to boost the signal by modifying the transmitter. He accidentally discovered a frequency that seemed to allow direct communication with whatever is down there. People who heard it became obsessed with finding it again. Some drove hundreds of miles just to get close to the station. A few never left. And the 333 caller. Helen's expression grew sad. Mrs. Eleanor Delmont. Her grandson Tommy was a patient in the old hospital. Paranoid schizophrenia, admitted in 1985 when he was 15. He was one of the ones who died in the fire. Eleanor died in 2002, but she still calls every night, still looking for her grandson. I thought about the elderly woman's voice, her polite request to speak about Tommy, her consistent hope that someone might have information. She's been dead for 20 years, 21 as of last month. The call comes through no matter what, even when the phone lines are down, even during power outages. She gets her 30 seconds because she's harmless, just a grieving grandmother. But if you give her more time, if you engage her in conversation, she starts talking about things she shouldn't know, things that are happening down there. Is that why she said Tommy was in the basement? Helen nodded. They're all in the basement, Danny. All 46 of them who died in the fire. The building collapsed and the fire didn't destroy them. It trapped them. And for 60 years, they've been trying to get out. I felt sick. The children singing. There were 8 children in the hospital when the fire started, ages 6 to 14. They sing the same songs they used to sing in the children's ward. Her voice was barely a whisper. They're not malicious, just confused, scared. They've been scared for 60 years. And the coffee pot? That one's actually simple. The automatic coffee maker was installed in 1998. It's on a timer, but the timer is controlled by the building's electrical system, which has been affected by the presence downstairs. It turns on when they want it to. We learned not to interfere when a DJ tried to disable it and lost power to the entire station for 3 days. I looked through more of the incident reports. The pattern was clear. People who violated the rules experienced escalating supernatural encounters until they either quit, were hospitalized, or disappeared entirely. Why do you keep the station running? Why not just shut it down? Seal the building? Helen's expression grew grave. Because the broadcast signal contains them. I don't fully understand the science, but our frequency creates some kind of barrier that keeps them confined to the basement levels. The few times we've gone off-air for extended periods, equipment failures, power outages, we've had incidents in town, Sightings, disturbances, people reporting encounters with figures that match descriptions of patients who died in the fire. So, the station is like a supernatural prison, more like a lid on a pot that's always trying to boil over. As long as we keep broadcasting, as long as we follow the rules, they stay contained. But it requires a human presence at night. It has to be someone who understands what they're dealing with and respects the boundaries. I thought about Trevor's nervous energy, his rush to leave every night before midnight. How many night DJs have you gone through? 17 in 27 years. Most last a few weeks or months before they decide it's not worth the money. A few lasted longer. One made it almost 3 years before burning out. You're the first to make it a month and still be asking for explanations instead of running away. What makes you think I won't run away now? Helen smiled sadly. Because I haven't told you the most important part yet. She reached into the folder and pulled out a yellowed hospital record sheet. At the top, a name, Robert Cartwright. Patient ID, 4247. Admitted, March 1962. Diagnosis, combat fatigue, severe depression. Status, deceased, fire victim, December 15th, 1963. My grandfather's name. My grandfather, who my father always said had died in Vietnam. Robert Cartwright was your grandfather, Danny. He was a Korean War veteran who never recovered from what he saw over there. His family committed him in 1962 when he started having violent episodes. He was in the basement level when the fire started. I stared at the record, my hands shaking. My dad said he died in Vietnam. Your father was 7 years old when his father was institutionalized. The family told him his father had died in the war, rather than explain that he was in a mental hospital. It was a different time. There was a lot of shame around mental illness. So my grandfather is down there with the rest of them. And that's why the phenomena have been stronger since you started working here. Your blood family to one of them. They recognize you, and they're responding to your presence. I felt like the room was spinning. Everything made sense now. The escalating incidents, the way the rules seemed harder to follow each night, the feeling that something was watching me from the basement. Are you firing me? No. I'm offering you the truth and a choice. You can quit now, tonight, and I'll find someone else to cover the shift. No hard feelings, no consequences. Or you can stay, knowing what you know now, and help us keep them contained. I thought about Mrs. Delmont, calling every night for 21 years after her death, still looking for her grandson. I thought about the children singing their scared, confused songs. I thought about my grandfather, trapped in the basement for 60 years, possibly aware that his grandson was finally close by. What happened to the other DJs who lasted more than a few months? They learned to coexist with the phenomena. They understood their role as guardians, keeping the boundaries intact. Most eventually moved on to day shifts or other jobs, but they stayed connected to the station. They understood the responsibility. And the ones who didn't make it. Helen's expression grew dark. The worst case was in 2007. A DJ named Kevin Brady started trying to communicate directly with the entities downstairs. He thought he could help them, maybe find a way to release them peacefully. He started violating the rules deliberately, trying to make contact. What happened to him? We found him in the basement. He'd somehow gotten the door open and gone down there. When we brought him up, he was catatonic. He spent 6 months in a psychiatric facility before he recovered enough to speak. He said he'd seen them, all of them, and that they weren't just trapped, they were suffering. The fire never ended for them. They're still burning, still trying to escape, still screaming for help. I felt sick again. Is he okay now? He moved to Florida and became a librarian. He calls me every Christmas to make sure we're still broadcasting. He understands what would happen if we stopped. I looked at my grandfather's hospital record again. Robert Cartwright, age 38 when he died. A veteran who'd seen too much, broken by war, and finished off by a fire that had trapped him in hell for 6 decades. "I'll stay," I said quietly. Helen smiled for the first time since I'd known her. "I hoped you would. But Danny, the phenomena will probably get stronger now that you know the truth. The entities can sense awareness, understanding. Some of them might try to make contact, especially your grandfather. You have to resist that temptation. The rules exist to protect you and everyone else." I understand. I hope you do. Because tomorrow night, you're going to face the hardest test yet. Helen was right. Knowing the truth made everything worse. On Tuesday night, my 29th shift, the caller ID showed all zeros 6 times. Each time I hung up immediately, but I could hear that grinding metallic voice saying my name before the line went dead. "Danny, Danny, Danny." The children's singing started at 1:47, almost an hour earlier than usual, and it was louder. More voices than I'd ever heard before, and they weren't just singing "Ring Around the Rosie" anymore. Now they were singing "Danny Boy," which made my skin crawl. I played classical music, but it took 3 pieces before they stopped. The basement sounds were constant now, not just matching my heartbeat, but seeming to anticipate it. When I got startled by a phone call or sudden noise, the banging from below would start a split second before my heart rate jumped, like something down there was connected to my nervous system. Wednesday night brought a new horror. The emergency broadcast system activated every 20 minutes with different fake alerts, chemical spills, gas leaks, tornado warnings, evacuation orders, all from non-existent facilities or agencies, all designed to sound official enough that I might relay them. I followed rule number 3 and ignored everyone, but the constant barrage was wearing me down. Thursday night, the static voices weren't just asking to be let out anymore. They were calling my name, telling me they knew who I was. "Danny, your grandfather is here. He wants to see you. Just come downstairs, just for a minute." I adjusted the equipment to filter them out, but they kept finding new ways through the system. Through the weather ticker, through the music feed, even through the phone lines when no one was calling. Friday night, Mrs. Delman's call came at 3:33, as always, but this time she had a different message. "Hello, dear. I wanted to tell you that I found my grandson. He's down there with your grandfather, you know. They're friends now. Your grandfather talks about you all the time. He's so proud that you're here, so close. He just wants to see you once before." I cut her off at 30 seconds, but her words echoed in my mind for the rest of the night. My grandfather was down there, aware of me, wanting to see me. The grandson he'd never met, the family he'd been separated from for over 60 years. Trevor started acting stranger during our brief handoffs. He'd barely make eye contact anymore, and he always seemed to be listening for something I couldn't hear. "It's getting stronger, isn't it?" he asked on Friday night. "Since you found out the truth. Helen told you?" "She didn't have to. I can feel it when I'm here. Whatever's down there, it's more active now, more focused." He gathered his things quickly. "Just be careful, Danny. They're not evil exactly, but they're desperate. Desperate things do desperate things." Saturday night was my 30th shift, and I could tell something was building. The air in the station felt thick, charged with electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every sound seemed to carry an echo I couldn't quite place. The coffee pot turned on and off 6 times during the night, cycling erratically like it was trying to send a message in some kind of electrical Morse code. The lights flickered in patterns that were almost rhythmic. The phone rang constantly with all zeros caller IDs, and each time I heard that metallic voice saying my name before I could hang up. At 4:15, during what should have been a quiet music block, every piece of equipment in the booth started acting up simultaneously. The main board reset itself, the computer crashed and rebooted, the transmitter cycled through different frequencies, and the emergency broadcast system activated with a message I'd never heard before. "Danny Cartwright, please report to the basement level. Your grandfather is waiting for you. This is not a test. Please report to the basement level immediately." I fought to get everything back under control, my hands shaking as I worked the controls. The fake alert repeated 3 more times before I managed to cut it off and restore normal programming. When Helen arrived Sunday morning, she took one look at my face and knew something had changed. How bad was it? They're calling me by name now. All of them. The static voices, the fake emergency broadcasts, even the all zeros caller. And Mrs. Delman said my grandfather talks about me. Helen nodded grimly. It's accelerating. Your presence here is strengthening their ability to interact with our world. The question is whether you can maintain the boundaries, or whether they'll eventually break through them. What happens if they break through? Based on what Kevin Brady described after his experience in the basement, they're not just ghosts or spirits. They're people who died in agony and have been reliving that agony for 60 years. If they break free from their containment, they'll try to drag others down with them, not out of malice, but because they're so desperate to escape their torment that they'll grab onto anyone they can reach. So I keep them contained by following the rules. Yes, but it's going to get harder. They know you now, Danny. They know you're Robert Cartwright's grandson, and they're going to use that connection to try to reach you. Your grandfather especially. He's going to try to convince you to help him. What if I want to help him? Helen's expression grew stern. Then you'll end up like Kevin Brady, or worse. Your grandfather isn't the man he was when he died. 60 years of being trapped in that basement, reliving the fire over and over, has changed him. Changed all of them. They're not the people they used to be. They're echoes of trauma and pain, and they'll consume anyone who gets too close. She pulled out a different file, this one much thinner. I want you to read this. It's Kevin Brady's full account of what he saw down there. The report was handwritten in shaky, uneven script. They're all there, every single one who died in the fire. But they're not dead the way you'd think. They're still burning. The fire never stopped for them. It just keeps going, over and over, the same flames consuming them eternally. Robert Cartwright recognized me somehow, knew I worked at the station. He begged me to bring his grandson down, said he just wanted to see family one more time. But when I got closer, I could see that half his face was burned away, and the wound was fresh, like it had just happened. He reached for me with hands that were still on fire. They're not evil, just desperate and insane from the pain. They want out so badly they'll do anything, promise anything, hurt anyone who might be able to help them. I tried to tell them I was there to help, but they couldn't understand anymore. All they know is burning and screaming and wanting it to stop. Don't go down there. Don't listen to them when they call your name. They love you and they'll destroy you, and they won't understand why those two things are the same. I set the report down, my hands trembling. This is what my grandfather has become. I'm afraid so. I'm sorry, Danny. I know it's hard to accept. But he's still my grandfather. He's still family. No, Helen said firmly. He was your grandfather. What's down there now is what's left after 60 years of unimaginable suffering. If you try to help him, you'll either end up trapped with them or you'll compromise the containment that protects everyone else. I thought about Mrs. Delmont, still calling every night after 21 years of death, still looking for her grandson, still loving him despite what he'd become. How do you bear it, knowing they're down there, suffering? Because I understand that letting them out wouldn't end their suffering. It would just spread it to others. The fire that burns them isn't physical anymore. It's spiritual, psychological. It would burn anyone they touched. Helen left me with Kevin Brady's report and instructions to call her immediately if anything unusual happened during my next shift, as if anything normal ever happened during my shifts anymore. That night, Sunday, my 31st shift, I almost broke. It started normally enough, but by 1 o'clock, the activity was more intense than it had ever been. The caller ID showed all zeros constantly, sometimes on multiple lines simultaneously. The children's singing started at midnight and didn't stop when I played classical music. The basement sounds weren't just banging anymore. They were voices, muffled but clearly human, calling my name over and over. At 2:30, the basement door unlocked itself. I heard the heavy click of the lock mechanism disengaging, then the slow creak of hinges as the door swung open. The musty smell that had always leaked through the gap at the bottom now filled the entire station, carrying with it the scent of smoke and something else, something burnt and organic that made my stomach turn. Rule number 4, the basement door stays locked. You don't have a key for a reason. But the rule didn't say what to do if the door unlocked itself. I could hear them more clearly now. Dozens of voices calling up from the darkness below, pleading and desperate. Danny, please, just come down for a minute. Your grandfather is waiting. We need help. It hurts so much. Please, Danny, please. And underneath all of it, one voice that stood out from the rest. An older man's voice, roughened by decades of screaming, but still somehow familiar, like an echo of my father's voice, aged by years of torment. Danny, is that really you, son? I've been waiting so long to meet you. Please come down, just for a minute. I just want to see my grandson's face. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, looking down into the darkness, listening to my grandfather's voice for the first time in my life. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but another part of me, the part that had grown up wondering about the grandfather I'd never known, wanted to take just one step down those stairs. Just one step to see the man my father had never talked about, to meet the family I'd been denied. Danny, please. My grandfather's voice drifted up from the darkness. I know I look different now, but I'm still your grandfather. I'm still family. Don't leave me alone down here anymore. I took one step down. The moment my foot touched the first stair, every light in the station went out. But the darkness below wasn't empty. It was full of movement, shapes shifting just at the edge of perception. And the voices grew louder, more urgent. Yes, come down. He's coming. Finally, grab him. Don't let him leave. I jerked my foot back up to the main floor and slammed the basement door shut. The lock engaged automatically with a loud click, and the lights came back on. But I could still hear them down there, calling my name, begging me to come back. I spent the rest of the night sitting as far from the basement door as possible, following the rules mechanically while trying not to listen to the voices that continued calling until dawn. When Helen arrived that morning, she found me sitting in the parking lot next to my car. The door opened, I said without preamble. They were calling me. My grandfather was calling me. She sat down on the curb beside me, but she didn't go down. I wanted to. I almost did. Almost doesn't count. You followed your training. You remembered the rules, and you kept everyone safe. That's what matters. Helen, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the pine trees that surrounded the station. I understand. You've lasted longer than most, and you've faced more than most. If you want to quit, I won't think less of you. But I think you're stronger than you know. And I think your grandfather is counting on that strength, not to rescue him, but to keep him from hurting anyone else. She turned to look at me. He's still your grandfather, Danny, even in his current state. And part of him probably still loves you enough to want you to stay safe, even if the tortured part of him is begging you to join him. How can you possibly know that? Because Mrs. Delmont still calls every night, still looking for her grandson, even though seeing him again would be the worst possible thing for both of them. Love doesn't die, Danny. It just gets complicated. I thought about that as I drove home, my hands still shaking from the night's encounters. Love doesn't die, but it can become dangerous, twisted by pain and desperation into something that hurts the very people it's trying to protect. I had 4 more shifts to get through before my first month was up. 4 more nights of resisting the voices of people I'd never met and the grandfather I'd always wondered about. 4 more nights of keeping hell contained beneath a small town radio station. Monday night was my 32nd shift, and I could feel the tension building from the moment I walked into the station. The air seemed thicker, charged with an energy that made my skin crawl. Trevor was already gathering his things when I arrived, 10 minutes early as always. It's going to be bad tonight, he said without looking at me. I can feel it building. Whatever's down there, it's preparing for something. Preparing for what? I don't know, but I've been doing this job for 3 years, and I've never felt anything like this. He paused at the door. Follow the rules, Danny. No matter what happens, no matter what they say or do, follow the rules. The first few hours were deceptively quiet. I played music requests, gave weather updates, and handled the usual late-night callers. But underneath the normalcy, I could sense something building, like the pressure change before a storm. At 12:45, the first crack appeared in the routine. The caller ID showed all zeros, but this time, when I hung up without answering, the phone immediately rang again. Same display. I hung up again. It rang again, and again, and again. By 1 o'clock, all 4 phone lines were showing all zeros caller IDs and ringing simultaneously. Every time I hung up one line, it would ring again before I could reach the next one. The constant ringing was making it impossible to focus on anything else. Finally, in desperation, I unplugged all the phone lines from the wall. The ringing stopped, but now I had no way to take requests or handle any legitimate calls. At 1:15, the children started singing. But this wasn't the usual time slot. Rule number 2 specified between 2 and 4, and it wasn't just Ring Around the Rosie anymore. They were singing happy birthday songs, Christmas carols, lullabies, and playground rhymes, all at the same time, creating a cacophony of innocent voices that was somehow more terrifying than any scream. I immediately started playing classical music, but it had no effect. The children kept singing, their voices growing louder and more distorted until individual words became impossible to distinguish. It was just a wall of childish vocals that seemed to be coming from every speaker in the building. At 1:30, the emergency broadcast system activated with a message I'd never heard before. This is an emergency alert for Pine Valley County. We have reports of a supernatural containment breach at WCRP radio station. All residents are advised to evacuate immediately. The situation is not under control. Repeat, evacuate Pine Valley immediately. I didn't relay it. Rule number 3 was clear. But the fact that the fake emergency was about the radio station itself sent chills down my spine. At 1:45, the coffee pot started cycling on and off rapidly, brewing half pots and dumping them, over and over, like it was having some kind of mechanical seizure. At 2 o'clock, the static started forming words, but not the usual pleas for help. This time, the voices were giving me directions. Go to the basement. The door is open. Your grandfather is waiting. Take the stairs, slowly. Watch your step in the dark. I tried to filter out the static, but it was coming through every audio channel now. The music, the weather feed, even the emergency broadcast system. At 2:15, I looked out the booth window and saw dozens of figures standing in the darkness around the station. Men, women, children, all wearing clothes from different eras, all standing perfectly still and facing the building. Some looked normal from a distance, but others were clearly wrong. Too tall, too thin, or missing parts of themselves. Rule number 9. If you see someone outside the booth windows, they're not there. But there were so many of them now, and they were so clearly visible that it was hard to convince myself they weren't real. At 2:30, Mrs. Delmont called. But it wasn't 3:33 yet, and when I answered, it wasn't the elderly woman's voice I'd grown accustomed to. It was a young man's voice, nervous and scared. "Is this Danny? Danny Cartwright? Who is this?" "It's Tommy. Tommy Delmont." "Grandma Ellie said you work at the radio station now. She said you might be able to help me." My blood went cold. Tommy Delmont, Mrs. Delmont's grandson, who had died in the fire in 1987. "Tommy, I can't help you." "I'm sorry, but I have to hang up." "Please don't hang up. I've been trying to call for so long, but Grandma always gets through first. I just want someone to know that we're not bad people. We're just scared, and we hurt all the time, and we want it to stop." Rule number 10 said, the 3:33 caller gets 30 seconds. But this wasn't the 3:33 caller, and it wasn't 3:33. There was no specific rule covering this situation. "Tommy, I believe you, but I can't help you. I'm sorry. Your grandfather is here with me. He wants to talk to you. Can you please just listen to him for 1 minute? Just 1 minute, and then we'll leave you alone." Before I could hang up, the voice changed. Older now, rougher, with the weight of decades of suffering. "Danny, it's Grandpa Robert. I've been waiting so long to talk to you." Every instinct screamed at me to hang up, but I couldn't move. This was my grandfather's voice, the grandfather I'd never known, never heard speak, but whose vocal patterns I could hear echoed in my father's speech. "I know this is scary for you, son, but I need you to understand something. We're not trying to hurt anyone. We just want to rest. We've been burning for so long and we're so tired. Grandpa, I can't help you. The rules. Forget the rules for just 1 minute. I'm your family, Danny, your blood. Your father never knew me, but you can. You can know your grandfather. Just come downstairs, just for 1 minute." "I can't." "Why not? Are you afraid of me, your own grandfather?" There was hurt in his voice, real pain that had nothing to do with the fire or the supernatural torment. It was the pain of a man who had died without ever meeting his grandson, who had spent 60 years knowing his family thought he'd died in a war instead of a mental hospital. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid for you and for everyone else." The line went dead. At 2:45, the basement door flew open so hard it slammed against the wall. The sound echoed through the station like a gunshot, and immediately the smell of smoke and burning flesh filled the air. They were coming up. I could hear footsteps on the stairs, not just one set, but dozens, shuffling, dragging sounds like people who were hurt or damaged, trying to climb stairs with bodies that didn't work properly anymore. The voices were clearer now, no longer muffled by distance and barriers. "Danny, we're coming to see you. Don't run away. We just want to talk. Family reunion." And above it all, my grandfather's voice. "Stay right there, son. Grandpa's coming up to meet you." Rule number 11. Emergency exits are for emergencies only. Something might follow you out. But this had to qualify as an emergency, right? The containment had failed, they were loose, and they were coming for me. I ran for the emergency exit at the back of the booth, but when I tried to push the door open, it wouldn't budge. Not locked, just immovable, like it was welded shut. I threw my shoulder against it, but it was solid as a wall. The footsteps were getting closer. I could see shapes moving in the main area of the station now. Human-shaped shadows that moved wrong, too jerky or too smooth, like people who had forgotten how to walk properly. I ran to the front door of the station and tried my key. It turned, but the door still wouldn't open. Same as the emergency exit. Not locked, just immovable. The windows were too small to climb through, and they were probably just as immovable anyway. I was trapped. "Danny?" My grandfather's voice was right outside the booth now. "Don't be scared, son. I know I probably look a little different than you expected, but it's still me." I couldn't see him clearly through the tinted glass of the booth, just a tall shape that seemed to flicker like a heat mirage. But I could smell him. Smoke and charred meat and something else, something sweet and sickly that made my gorge rise. "Open the door, Danny. Let me give my grandson a hug." Rule number 12. If the lights go out, keep broadcasting in the dark. I was still on the air. Through all of this, music had been playing. The transmitter was still running, and Pine Valley was still receiving WCRP's signal. Whatever happened to me, I had to keep broadcasting. I sat down at the control board and tried to ignore the shapes pressing against the booth windows, the voices calling my name, the sound of something scratching at the booth door. "We're not leaving, Danny," my grandfather said. "We waited 60 years to meet you. We can wait a little longer." The scratching at the door became pounding. The booth windows began to rattle in their frames. The smell of smoke grew stronger, and I could swear I was starting to see actual flames reflecting in the glass. At 3:33, the phone rang. Somehow, despite being unplugged, one of the phone lines was active. The caller ID showed a local number, Mrs. Delmont's number, the one I'd memorized after 33 nights of calls. I answered. "Hello, dear." Mrs. Delmont's familiar elderly voice, calm and gentle despite the chaos around me. "I'm sorry about all the fuss tonight. The boys are just excited to have family visiting." "Mrs. Delmont, I need help. They're trying to break into the booth." "Oh, they won't hurt you, dear. They're just scared and confused. But I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you still broadcasting?" I checked the board. "Yes." "Good. That's very important. You keep broadcasting no matter what happens. The signal is what keeps them from going into town, from hurting people who can't protect themselves." "But they're trying to get to me." "Yes, dear, because you're family. They want to take you home with them. But you can't go, you understand? If you go down to the basement, if you let them take you, then there's no one left to keep broadcasting. And they'll spread out into Pine Valley, looking for other people to bring home." The pounding on the door was getting louder. I could hear my grandfather's voice pleading with me to open it, promising he just wanted to see me, just wanted to hold his grandson once. What do I do? You keep broadcasting, and you wait for dawn. They can't maintain this level of activity much longer. It takes too much energy for them to manifest this strongly. When the sun comes up, they'll have to go back down. What if they break through first? There was a pause. Then you remember that they love you, dear. Even if they hurt you, even if they take you down there with them, it's because they love you and they don't understand that love and harm can be the same thing. At 4 o'clock, the booth door started to crack. I could see splits forming in the wood. spreading outward from where the pounding was strongest. Through the cracks, I caught glimpses of what was on the other side, shapes that had once been human, but were wrong now, twisted by decades of supernatural torment. I saw my grandfather's face for the first time. Half of it was normal, an older version of my father's features, with the same nose and jawline I saw in the mirror every morning. The other half was charred black, burned away to expose bone and sinew that glistened wetly in the flickering light. But his eyes were the worst part. They were my father's eyes, my eyes, but filled with a pain so deep it was almost impossible to look at. "Please, Danny," he said through the cracking door. "I've missed so much of your life. Let me be your grandfather for just a few minutes." The door was about to give way. I could see hands, some normal, some burned, some that were just bone, pushing through the cracks. In a few more seconds, they'd be inside. I looked at the clock. 4:17. Less than 2 hours until dawn. I made a decision. Instead of trying to keep them out, I started talking to them. "Grandpa Robert, it's Danny. I'm here." The pounding stopped. "I can't open the door, and I can't come down to see you. But I'm here, and I can hear you, and I want you to know that I've wondered about you my whole life." Silence from the other side of the door. "My dad never talked about you. I grew up thinking you died in Vietnam, thinking you were a war hero. It wasn't until tonight that I learned the truth. The truth is that I failed." My grandfather's voice was barely a whisper. "I came back from Korea broken, and I couldn't take care of my family. I let them put me in that place, and then I died in a fire like an animal. That's not failure. That's illness. You were sick, and you couldn't help it. I left your father without a father. I left your grandmother to raise a child alone. And they survived. Dad grew up, got married, had me. The family continued. Your sacrifice meant something. I didn't sacrifice anything. I just died. You're sacrificing now. You could break through that door. I know you could, but you're not. You're talking to me instead of hurting me, because somewhere in there, you're still my grandfather, and you still want to protect me." The scratching and pounding from the other spirits grew quieter, like they were listening. "I want to protect everyone," my grandfather said, "but I also want to stop hurting. We all do. It never ends, Danny. The fire never stops burning. I know, and I wish I could help you. But the only way I can help is by keeping you contained, keeping you from spreading that fire to other people. So you'll stay up there, and we'll stay down here, and nothing will ever change. Maybe something will change someday. Maybe someone smarter than me will find a way to help you. But right now, this is what we have. Will you stay? Will you keep working here? Keep talking to us sometimes?" I thought about it. I thought about Trevor's nervous energy and Helen's tired eyes and all the other night DJs who had come and gone over the years. I thought about Pine Valley sleeping peacefully, unaware of what was contained beneath their small-town radio station. "I'll stay as long as I can. That's all I can ask for." My grandfather's voice was getting fainter, like he was moving away from the door. "I love you, Danny. I know that's a strange thing to say when we've never met, but I love you." I love you too, Grandpa. At 5 o'clock, the voices started to fade. The shapes outside the booth windows began to disappear. The smell of smoke gradually dissipated, replaced by the usual musty odor of the old building. At 5:30, the basement door swung shut with a solid click as the lock engaged. At 6 o'clock, Helen arrived to find me sitting in the booth, still broadcasting, staring at the cracked door that had somehow repaired itself while I wasn't looking. "You made it through," she said. "Barely. But you made it. And you kept broadcasting the whole time. They could have broken through. My grandfather could have gotten to me if he'd really wanted to." Helen nodded. "The containment isn't just about the rules and the broadcast signal. It's also about choice. They choose to stay contained because some part of them understands what would happen if they didn't. Will it happen again? Will they try to break out again? Probably not like this. This was their best chance. They've been building up to it since you started working here. But they failed, and that failure will weaken them for a while. So I can keep working here." Helen smiled. "If you want to. But Danny, you don't have to become a permanent guardian. You don't have to sacrifice your entire life to this job. You've proven yourself, earned their respect. You can train someone else, move to day shift, even leave entirely if you want." I thought about my grandfather's burned face, the pain in his eyes, the love in his voice despite everything he'd been through. I thought about Mrs. Delmont calling every night for 21 years, still looking for her grandson. I thought about the children singing their scared songs in the dark. I'll stay for now. But I want to train a replacement eventually. Someone who understands what they're getting into. Fair enough. There's a young woman named Alex who's applied for part-time work. She's got experience with unusual situations. As I drove home that morning, I realized the radio in my car was tuned to 88.7. For just a moment, I could swear I heard children singing "Ring Around the Rosie" in broad daylight, their voices faint but clear. I turned the radio off and drove the rest of the way home in silence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere beneath Pine Valley, my grandfather was listening to every signal that traveled through the air, waiting for the night shift to begin again. The containment held, but it wasn't perfect. It never had been. And maybe that was the point.